Hi there. So it's your society's 50th anniversary, and it's the 50th anniversary since I first uh, directed a major excavation for Warwick County Museum in 1970, summer of 1975. So where I was excavating the site of where my school had been before it was moved in the 19th century and the buildings there had been demolished. So this is sort of quite an appropriate 50-year moment. And I'm going to be talking today about something which goes back almost as far in terms of it being collected, which is this archive, the Yoward archive of cast iron grave markers, which, if anything's niche, this is niche. Okay, and it's niche in a way that is both fascinating and also has lots of ramifications which make it perhaps slightly less niche than you might have first thought. This archive is housed at the Ironbridge Museum and Archives, in the archives which are next to the Museum of Iron building. As you know, the Ironbridge Museum complex has archaeological sites and collections, in situ and moved buildings, and from March 2026 is going to be part of the National Trust. So everyone is waiting to see quite what that will do to the way in which everything is structured and organised, but all the different components of the Ironbridge Museum complex and landscape that are under the control of the present trust are to be passed over and are all to be remain intact, including the the pipeworks and so on. So we wait and see where that's going to go. But I'm going to be talking about this particular archive, which also relates to other material that they have, which, for example, at the coffin works at Bliss Hill. Now, this archive exists because Tony and Mary Yoward created it with the help, again, of volunteers from around the country that they managed to inspire. I heard him speak once, which is why I knew that this work had happened. Many years ago, I heard him speak, but he's been dead, sadly, for quite a while, and I didn't know what happened to his archive. So I managed to find on the internet that the Mills archive, because he was also a Mills geek, had been deposited with the Mills Society. So I contacted them, and they thought it might be at Ironbridge. So I contacted Ironbridge, and they say, "Oh goodness, someone who might know something about what to do with this archive. We've got it all in boxes as it arrived. No one's looked at it. No one even knows what a CIGM is." So they were delighted that I went and had a look at it and evaluated the archive. And we've started working together on making use of this resource. And ideally, this will be something that is expanded into eventually some sort of citizen science type of activity that can actually increase the collection size in the archive, because it's pretty widespread, but it's far from having covered everywhere. I'm interested in this because I'm interested in all sorts of historic mortuary culture practices, and I'd be very interested to hear from any of you about any of these things that you have. This is the sort of transition between archaeology and other sort of local history collections. I'm studying memorials, the vaults, crypts, and shafts that people get buried in, the coffins and their fittings, items placed with burials, which may be personal items like jewelry, buttons, and so on, but may also be things like plates or bottles. This is in the historic period, not ancient periods. Grave robbing prevention. There's nothing like a bit of grave robbing to excite the public. So the prevention methods for that are really quite interesting. Just seen the report from the HS2 site in Euston. They had quite a number of grave robbing prevention coffins there, rather more than anywhere else has had. So that's interesting. And also mourning material culture. And they have some coffin fittings and mourning material culture also at Ironbridge and Cape Cadman, the keeper of collections there is looking at some of that material. I also like funeral invitation cards and all those sorts of things. Not to get invitations to people's funerals, but old cards. So I've been working with students going through this voluminous archive. The most exciting thing of which I think is that AA atlas that you see there, which I'm pointing at, looking very authoritative. That is an atlas where they actually marked up on the atlas everywhere they'd been. They actually ringed it on the atlas. So there's this ancient atlas they must have taken out year after year, and they marked up everywhere they went, and they marked up whether they found something there or whether they didn't. And I think that's a remarkably early, this is an amateur sort of recorder noting down rigorously where they went and there wasn't anything, as well as where there was. So from that we can see all the places that they didn't visit, which would be wonderful if other people visited and looked for them. But at least we don't go over the same old ground again to the ones. So I think that's just fantastic. It was that shows the rigor of their archive, which makes it such a valuable matter. He only wrote one thing about them, which I think must have been based on the lecture I heard him give, which was given the exciting title Cast Iron Gravestones, and it's, as you see, 3 pages long. So that's all he's ever used it for. He was more a compiler and organizer than he was a writer and researcher and interpreter. So there's fantastic potential with this material, and to link it to all these other sorts of mortuary culture in terms of style, production, and so on. So what is a cast iron grave marker? I'm sure you're all asking, if only so that I might go away and you'll feel satisfied. This is what one of them looks like. You can see the front and the back, pressed into sand from a mould and cast. So they're quite thin. Prongs at the bottom here are broken off that will be in the ground. So, and there are vast numbers, and some of these are done by the Coalbrookdale Iron Company in Ironbridge, but lots of companies around the country were producing these in the 19th and the very first part of the 20th century. And here's just a couple of pages from catalogues and advertisements. You'll see some more in a minute. Which gives you an idea of the sort of styles and the flavour of them. There are 2 main sorts. There's the sort on the right, which is like the one we just saw as the example, with the letters pressed into the sand and cast into the sand. So they stand out proud on the memorial and are cast at the moment. And then the one on the left is blank. You just cast lots of blanks, you send them off, and people paint on the text. Just like they can paint on the text onto a breastplate, on a coffin or whatever. So those sorts often then have lost their text now, but were a different format, and you could have those in stock, whereas the other one had to be commissioned and produced. You could also add people on to the one on the left when more people died. It's much more difficult to do that with the other sort. Yep. So with this one, there's a text and then there's a little epitaph. Here you could fit more than one person on if you wished, with the way you lay out the text. So they're more like a normal gravestone in terms of how they might have a life. A few of these do have secondary inscriptions which have to be bolted on in a most inelegant way. So they're not really made for that style. Here we see some that are painted. They would have all originally been painted. And here you can see one where you can see the text all nicely done with very fancy lettering in this particular case. What's important about them is that they're one of the cheapest form of memorials you could have, much cheaper than stone, and quite relatively durable, providing they're maintained. But of course they've been cleared away. World War II efforts when all the railings were taken away, all stolen for scrap, or just they look untidy and they've been cleared away. So they are probably a lot of the ones that they recorded don't exist anymore. So the prices here you see from 7 shillings with just one simple priming coat to £3, much bigger and fully decorated. So you can see all these fancy cross designs that you can have in cast iron that you wouldn't be able to have in stone. So we begin to see a mix between ones that are copying stone, which we'll see in a second, and ones that are really making use of the material. And I think that's something I want to research a bit more, how that developed, because some of the earliest ones are very much mirroring stone ones. So here we have multi-component ones where you sort of buy a kit and you bolt it together. It's not quite IKEA, but it's a bit like that. So these are lots of different pieces of cast iron which you put together to make your monument, and they can be really quite elaborate and large. A lot of them of these types are mirroring the stone forms. So these are very much like the ones that you have in stone, and choosing one in cast iron is making a particular sort of statement. But then the cast iron ones allow you a much greater flexibility, particularly the way in which you can have this sort of much more light coming through the memorial. There's one interesting coffin-shaped one. I rather like that. I don't think I'll be allowed to have one like that for myself, but that's another possibility. And they're in all the revival styles which we see in the memorials and which we see in a lot of other, obviously in architecture, but also in all sorts of other material culture that's in the home. So classical revival styles, both in stone and cast iron there. We have the Gothic revival, stone on the right, cast iron in the two examples, one of which we've seen before. Revival styles in terms of Egyptian, so you can have a cast iron objects that match the stone ones. And most commonly of all, as we've already seen in a number of other pictures, are the crosses, which we have in stone. On the left is a catalogue from Beamish Museum's archive of some of the many forms of Carrara marble imported crosses that you could choose from your catalogue, and then the equivalent in the cast iron. So the cast iron is providing a different set of, you see, much more elaborate options than many of the marble, just because of the character of the material. Oh, something exciting's happened there. Are you seeing that? No, you're not. That's all right. I'm seeing something you're not, which is very exciting. I won't tell you what it is. So there's also Celtic revival crosses. Some of them are quite large, and a lot of them are very, very small. You can just imagine sort of turning up and hammering that in with a mallet, and there you are. Here are some ones from Hayden of Warminster in Wiltshire. They're not only being produced in very industrial places. Many of you will have collections which will have a lot of agricultural equipment and other types of things that are linked to local foundry production. And many of these foundries were producing these types of monument, sometimes using licenses and designs from major manufacturers, sometimes doing their own. And so you can link this type of monument and these types of product in with a wider local craft industry. And also you can link it, and I'm interested in all these types of material culture, into these different types of cards, mourning jewellery, coffin fittings, and we're doing some work, and we're very interested to collaborate with anyone who wants to collaborate with us, analysing the metal on the surfaces and the base material of the fittings. At the bottom there is a little graph. You can't, the scale hasn't come out, but it's showing the amount of tin versus copper alloy in some of the memorials, and then others we have fittings, and some of the other fittings are the other way around. They're mainly copper alloy with very low amounts of tin. So, and there's a lot of interesting different ways in which the surfacing of these fittings is also achieved. It's quite, they're trying out all sorts of new processes on these disposable items, because they're only for use once. They don't have to have any lasting significance because they're only used on the one day. So there's a lot of material here that links to the cast iron memorials that we're very interested in researching if you're interested in collaborating with us. If you're interested about graveyard recording, and also if you just want to see the sorts of sad things I write, you can look me up and see the geeky output that I produce. That's all this sort of death-related material when I'm not doing things that are more exciting, like digging at Norton Priory or whatever else I might be doing. But so 50 years on, I end up circling back to somebody's archive that was started at about the same time as I started digging, and although it never achieved its potential, now is the opportunity for us to revisit it. And later on today we're hearing more about archives, and this just goes to show how archives do give us a whole new option when we return to them, providing they're being collected in a way that we can make sense of. And the greatest thing about the Yowards was that they did it systematically and knew what they were doing. So I can evaluate distributions and all the rest of it because of the way they did it. So thanks to them, I can stand here and tell you about it. And now you'll never see a graveyard in the same light again. And you'll be absolutely petrified there might be a cast iron memorial there, and you'll get a shudder through your spine as you remember this morning. So thank you very much.